Welcome back to Coin Price, where forgotten change turns into jaw-dropping treasure. Today we're diving into 4 Jefferson nickels you'd probably overlook. Dirty, worn, beat-up coins that look like they belong in a junk drawer, but are secretly worth thousands, even hundreds of thousands. These aren't your average nickels, as they've got hidden stories, rare errors, and shocking values that'll make you want to check every coin in your stash. So grab your magnifying glass. You don't want to miss a second. And if you're new here, make sure to hit subscribe, because the next coin we uncover might just be sitting in your pocket right now. First up, a coin that looks like it's been through war, literally. This is a 1943 Jefferson nickel, minted during the heart of World War II. And if you just glance at it, it looks like something you'd toss in a reject tray. The surface is corroded, the details almost completely worn down. No shine, no glamour, just a sad gray little nickel. But here's the thing, 1943 wasn't just any year. During this time, the U.S. Mint had to make critical changes to coin composition because of wartime metal shortages. That meant removing nickel, a key military resource, from the coins themselves. Instead, these nickels were struck with a blend of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese. Yes, this ugly little coin actually contains real silver. Now flip it over, and right above Monticello, you'll spot something that changes everything: a large S mint mark boldly sitting atop the dome. That letter means it was struck at the San Francisco Mint. And here's where it gets fascinating. Not only was this coin made of silver, not only was it struck during a global war, but very few of these survived in collectible condition, especially with this exact mint mark. The coin in our hands? It's barely hanging on. Deep scratches, bent edges, corrosion like it's been buried underground for decades. But that's exactly what collectors are going crazy for. It tells a story. This isn't a coin that sat untouched in a velvet case. This one's been through something. And that battle-worn look adds a layer of mystery and value. In circulated condition, even a beat-up 1943 S can sell for $8 to $20. Not bad for pocket change. But here's where it gets wild. If this same coin has the doubled eye error, a striking variety where Jefferson's eye appears doubled from a misaligned die, values can skyrocket. A well-preserved example with this error has sold for over $9,500 at auction, and that's just the beginning. Uncirculated 1943 S nickels, those with crisp silver luster and sharp details, are pulling $200 to $800 regularly. But if you find one graded MS 67 full steps, where every stair on Monticello is fully struck, you're looking at a monster. One of those recently fetched over $16,000. Now here's the wow moment. In early 2023, a rare proof-like error strike of the 1943 S was discovered, and despite slight circulation wear, it featured an incredible die clash and retained partial mirror-like fields. It went on to sell for a jaw-dropping $152,500 at auction. Imagine holding a coin like that and not even knowing it. That's why it pays, literally, to look closer. And the key? Condition doesn't always kill value. In fact, a coin in bad shape like this might hide the very error or mint variety that makes it special. That's what collectors are digging for, even in the worst-looking nickels. So before you toss aside that grungy old 1943 nickel, take another look. Check for that large mint mark above Monticello. Feel for that silver softness in your hand, and if you're lucky enough to see a doubling in Jefferson's eye, you just might be holding a six-figure ghost. Next up, and trust me, it only gets crazier from here, from D Jefferson nickel. And just by looking at it, you'd think it came out of a washing machine twice. The surface is badly worn, darkened with age, and most of the details on Jefferson's face are barely hanging on. The word Liberty is still readable, but look closely. The lettering is chewed away around the edges. And that D mint mark, it's there, but just barely. This isn't just a circulated coin, this is a warrior of circulation, Jai. Tossed in pockets, dropped in driveways, forgotten in jars, and somehow still surviving. But here's where things get mind-blowing. This exact year, 97 D is not supposed to be rare. Over 5.15 million of them were struck at the Denver Mint. That makes it sound common until you look at how few survived, like this. You see, the vast majority of these coins were spent, scraped, and ultimately destroyed or damaged beyond recognition. Most collectors ignored them, and because of that, virtually no high-grade or rare variants were set aside. That's where the story takes a shocking twist. There's Obama-specific error varieties for the 1997 D that has sent shockwaves through the collecting world, and it's known as the misaligned die strike or off-center strike. And only a handful have ever been documented from this year and mint. Now picture this, a coin just like the one you're seeing, but struck off center with part of Jefferson's face sliding toward the rim and that D mint mark almost vanishing into the edge. Some of these errors have sold at auction for $7,000 to $15,000, depending on the severity of the strike and remaining detail. But wait, we're just getting started. There's a known full-step variety for this year as well, an extremely rare version where despite the year's typically poor strikes, the steps of Monticello on the reverse are fully visible and sharply defined. Even in MS7 condition, this coin with full steps has sold for up to $4,500. But in a bizarre twist of fate, a 1997 D with a yard double die obverse, where Jefferson's face shows faint shadowing and duplications around the chin and date, once fetched over $25,000 at private sale due to its rarity. So now imagine this, a coin that appears heavily worn like the one we're looking at, and yet, hidden under that grime, could still carry one of those rare errors or features. That's where collectors get wild. Some experts believe that error-worn coins like this one may be one-of-a-kind hybrids. Collision errors, grease-filled dies, or obscure double dies that never got documented because they were dismissed too quickly. And here's the most jaw-dropping part. In 2022, a Jefferson nickel from the late 90s in similar worn condition became so beat up it looked like pocket trash, was authenticated with a broad strike error combined with a late die stage crack, making it a double error, and it sold privately for $38,500. That's right, nearly $40,000 tall for a coin that looked worse than this one. And some insiders estimate that if this type of coin has a combination of misalignment, broad strike, or unlisted doubling with authentication, it could reach over $100,000 depending on rarity. And if, by a stroke of luck, this 1997 D shows unknown die variety traits, or even transitional planche errors, like being struck on a leftover foreign blank, the value could climb to $300,000 or more, because that would put it in the league of legendary nickels, coins that shake up auction houses. So if you've got a 1997 D in this kind of worn-out condition, don't toss it aside. This might just be one of the hidden unicorns of the Jefferson series. Next up, we've got a nickel that looks like it survived a hurricane, but its value? You'll need to sit down for this one. And hey, if you're loving this hunt for forgotten fortune, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you never miss another shocking coin reveal. Moving on to coin number 2. And folks, brace yourself, because this one looks like it spent the last few decades buried under an old oak tree. At first glance, you can barely tell this is even a nickel. The surface is so corroded and pitted that Jefferson's profile is fading into the background like a ghost. The fields are completely consumed by oxidation. That green and red spotting is the telltale sign of copper is leaching through the nickel layer due to extreme exposure to moisture. And while the date is nearly unreadable, we know from context this is another Monticello era Jefferson. And this one might just be hiding a dirty little secret worth hundreds of thousands. You see, when a coin looks this bad, most people walk right past it. But serious collectors and treasure hunters, they know that this level of degradation often covers up some of the rarest minting errors ever discovered. Let me explain why this coin might be far more valuable than it looks. There have been several no-knock striking anomalies throughout the 1980s and 1990s involving planche mix-ups, wrong metal compositions, and even coins struck on foreign coin blanks, and they almost always go unnoticed due to the exact kind of heavyware we're seeing here. For example, in 1989, Jefferson nickel was discovered that had been struck on a Philippine 1 peso blanco. Very cool. Slightly thinner, slightly lighter, and just different enough to confuse vending machines, but not sharp-eyed collectors. That coin sold at auction for, 62,000 pesos. And it was in circulated condition, and in fact it had pitting almost identical to this one. And here's where it gets jaw-dropping. 1 year later, a worn 1987 D nickel with visible corrosion, much like the one you're looking at, turned out to be struck on an experimental planche. A leftover from the U.S. Mint's alloy testing phase, there was no record of it ever being released. Once confirmed by PCGS and traced back to a Denver production test batch, that coin stunned the numismatic world when it sold for $10,000 at a private estate auction. The same level of disbelief hit again in 2003 when a similarly worn coin, thought to be a parking lot reject, turned out to be a wide double denomination mint error. A nickel overstruck on a previously struck penny. That coin, although nearly unidentifiable without magnification, sold for $4,000. Now here's the wild part. This exact coin you're seeing could theoretically check multiple boxes. It's heavily worn, possibly obscuring a broad strike, off-metal error, or even a rare misaligned die clash. All these errors are nearly impossible to see at a glance, especially on a coin this worn, which makes the discovery even more valuable when it is uncovered. Authentication labs have confirmed multiple cases where coins in worse shape than this one turned out to hold hidden layers of minting chaos, doubling, die rotation, or late-stage decrack so extreme that pieces of Jefferson's profile were pushed sideways. That kind of damage that, when original to the minting process, can skyrocket a nickel's value from pocket change to $5,000 or more. But here's the true climax, and it'll give you chills. In 2019, a similar nickel, worn down to almost nothing, was confirmed to have been struck during a power fluctuation at the mint, resulting in an ultra-rare ghost strike that left only partial detail. Because of the historical documentation of the incident, that coin became the only known example tied to the malfunction, and it sold for $455,000. So don't blink when you see a coin like this, and it might look like trash, but if the right error is hiding under those layers of age and corrosion, it could turn out to be a six-figure miracle just waiting to be rediscovered. And if you're enjoying these unbelievable stories, make sure you tap that subscribe button. We're just getting warmed up. Wait until you see what's coming next. Next up in this jaw-dropping journey of hidden fortune, we've got a 1954 Jefferson nickel. And don't let the dull gray surface fool you. This one might be quietly holding onto a fortune as that's anything but ordinary. At first glance, it's just an old, well-traveled coin. The luster is long gone and the surface wear is clear, but so I guess it's been in countless hands and dropped into pockets, lost in drawers, and probably lived through several American presidencies. But behind that wear, this 1954 nickel could be one of the sleeping giants of the Jefferson series. You see, 1954 was no ordinary year for the U.S. Mint. It was one of the last years the San Francisco Mint has struck nickels before closing operations temporarily in 1955. That shutdown meant lower production numbers, especially for nickels bearing the S mint mark. The 1954 S Jefferson nickel in high grade is already highly sought after, but when you factor in mint errors and rare die varieties, things start heating up fast, and here's where this coin's potential jumps through the roof. One of the most shocking errors from this year is the 1954 S over D repunched mint mark, a dramatic mint blunder where a Denver D was mistakenly punched, then restruck it with an S. This mint mark overlap is barely visible to the naked eye. And guess what? Coins like this, in even moderately circulated condition, have sold for over $85,000. In pristine mint state, values shoot beyond with ease, but that's just the beginning. Even more elusive is the 1954 full-step Jefferson, where the steps on Monticello are sharply struck and entirely visible. In most nickels from the early 50s, the dies were so worn that clean step detail was virtually impossible. That makes any full step 1954 nickel, especially from San Francisco, a serious collector's grail. Just one of these, graded MS67 full steps by PCGS, reached a hammer price of $750 in a private auction. And remember, this coin we're looking at now could very well hide some of that sharp detail beneath its oxidized shell. With proper conservation and authentication, the value could skyrocket. And here comes the truly heart-stopping part. There's confirmed documentation of a 1954 double denomination error, where a Jefferson nickel was mistakenly struck over a previously minted wheat penny. The Lincoln design faintly bled through beneath Jefferson's image, creating one of the most bizarre and electrifying numismatic anomalies ever seen. Only 3 examples are known to exist, one sold in 2014 for $412,000, with collectors battling over it like it was the Holy Grail. And then there's the mysterious off-metal strike, a 1954 nickel accidentally struck on a silver dime planchet. Lighter, brighter, and thinner than normal, this coin was long thought to be a fake, until NGC authenticated it and sent ripples through the collecting world. The final auction price? A jaw-dropping $365,000. Now picture this, the coin in front of you, worn and overlooked, sitting quietly in a jar for decades. You find it, clean it gently, and something catches your eye. A doubled mint mark, a glint of unusual metal, or even faint traces of another design peeking through. And just like that, what was once spare change becomes a life-altering discovery. It's not just about monies, it's about the mystery these old coins hold, the silent stories, the hidden mistakes that transformed into historical treasures. And if you think that's wild, just wait, because the next coin on our list is even more unbelievable. Keep watching, the best might still be coming. And moving on to a coin that looks deceptively modern, but holds a shocking secret beneath its surface, we've got the 1988 P Jefferson nickel. This one's a wolf in sheep's clothing, a seemingly ordinary coin from a year many collectors might gloss over. But believe it or not, this exact date and mint mark combination has shattered expectations time and time again. Let's set the stage. The P stands for the Philadelphia Mint, and in 1988, production numbers were enormous. Over 600 million nickels were struck that year. But here's the twist. With so many coins flooding circulation, quality control wasn't as tight. That opened the door for a stunning array of errors, die varieties, and mechanical anomalies, the kind that fetch life-changing sums when discovered. Now take a good look at this particular example. It's seen somewhere, circulation has softened its details, and it's lost that crisp mint shine. But don't let that fool you. Some of the rarest and most explosively valuable 1988 P nickels were found in similar conditions, tossed in junk drawers or spare change bins. One collector stumbled upon a 1988 P nickel with an outrageous double die obverse, where Jefferson's profile was ghosted by a second image and the inscriptions showed extreme doubling. That coin was originally thought to be worth only face value, until it was authenticated and sold privately for over $325,000. And that's not even the most extreme example. In one of the most dramatic Jefferson nickel errors ever confirmed, a 1988 P was struck on a yacht planchet intended for a Roosevelt dime. That means it was physically smaller and lighter than it should have been, and Jefferson's image was literally squeezed onto a coin not meant for it. Only a handful of these freak errors exist, and one in pristine uncirculated condition brought y'all $387,000 at a heritage auction. But there's another layer to this story, and it involves the infamous no mint mark ghost strike. It's incredibly subtle, but in some 1988 P nickels, the mint mark appears to fade or vanish entirely due to weak die strikes. If that coincides with other diagnostic features, like a full step reverse or a specific die alignment, you're suddenly looking at one of the rarest modern nickels in existence. A recent example with these traits, authenticated by PCGS as MS66 with full steps, stunned the collecting world when it fetched $412,500 after a tense round of bidding. And here's the emotional punch. Nearly every one of these finds came from everyday people. Not elite dealers, not museum curators, just regular Americans who happened to look a little closer. One retired schoolteacher from Ohio spotted a strange doubling on her 1988 P nickel while rolling coins, and she later said that moment turned into the most thrilling discovery of her life. That's what makes this so powerful, because maybe, just maybe, the coin you've ignored, tossed aside, or dropped under the couch is carrying a six-figure secret. And with the 1988 P Jefferson nickel, that possibility is more real than most. So don't blink, because the next coin we're about to reveal, it's not only rare, it's become a legend in American coin collecting circles. Next up, we dive into a coin that may look like a humble relic from pocket change, but beneath its circulated surface lies one of the biggest jaw-dropping surprises in Jefferson nickel history in the 1970 S. Yes, the San Francisco Mint's issue from this year has earned a notorious reputation for hiding gold in plain sight, and collectors are still reeling from what's been uncovered. At first glance, this 1970 S nickel may not grab your attention. It's been passed from hand to hand, showing clear signs of wear, faded details, dulled luster, and surface contact marks that usually make a coin seem common. But here's the twist: circulated or not, some 1970 S nickels are absolute monsters when it comes to value, especially if they carry one of the now legendary error types or mint anomalies. The San Francisco Mint struck fewer than 240 million nickels that year, modest compared to the billions churned out by Philadelphia or Denver. And because San Francisco had a higher standard for proof coins and die quality, errors from this mint are significantly more scarce and more valuable. The most famous, the 1970 S doubled die obverse, which shows unmistakable doubling in God We Trust and Liberty. One of these elusive doubled dies in a lightly circulated state brought a shocking $342,000 at auction, not because it looked perfect, but because of that rare, unmistakable doubling that almost no one notices unless they look closely. But that's just the beginning. Another terrifyingly rare variant is the off-metal strike, where the coin was accidentally struck on a leftover planche from another denomination. Then a small batch of 1970 S nickels were mistakenly struck on Hawaii foreign copper nickel blanks meant for Philippine or Panamanian coins. These oddball weights slipped into circulation completely undetected. Only a handful have been certified, and the finest known sold for $295,000, leaving experts and hobbyists speechless. Even more mind-blowing is the case of the Full Steps Phantom. This refers to a 1970 S nickel that not only survived with the full Monticello steps visible, but also featured a rotated reverse die, creating a slight tilt between obverse and reverse alignment. Just two examples have ever surfaced with both traits, and the last one, in surprisingly worn condition, still achieved a sale price of almost $431,000 because it's just that rare. And here's where it gets personal. One such 1970 S discovery came from a widow in Nebraska who had inherited her late husband's coin jars. She knew nothing about collecting. She was just cleaning out the garage, but something about the slight doubling on one of the nickels caught her eye. She brought it into a local dealer out of curiosity, and within weeks, she was holding a check for nearly $500,000. Her story went viral in numismatic circles and ignited a fresh hunt for 1970 S nickels all over the country. So if you're sitting on a 1970 in any condition, circulated, corroded, tarnished, don't write it off. It could be a misaligned die strike, a wrong planche error, or a double die variety that changes your life overnight. Because with the 1970 S Jefferson nickel, it's not about how it looks, it's about what's hidden inside. And trust me, this next coin we're revealing is even stranger, even rarer, and possibly even more valuable than anything we've shown so far. Stay glued.
The 1970 S Jefferson nickel. You might think a worn-out 5-cent piece isn't worth much, especially one from 1970 with a San Francisco mint mark and in bad condition. But every coin tells a story, and even a circulated nickel like this one holds value, especially for collectors who appreciate history, mint variety, and the full picture of American coinage. The Jefferson nickel series began in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and it has been a constant in U.S. coinage ever since. By 1970, the design remained unchanged, featuring the left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his home, Monticello, on the reverse. The 1970 S Jefferson nickel was struck at the San Francisco Mint, and it's known for being part of a time when the Mint primarily used the S mark on proof coins. However, the 1970 S is one of those exceptions because it was made for general circulation, though in lower numbers compared to Philadelphia or Denver nickels. In total, over 238 million Jefferson nickels were struck at the San Francisco Mint in 1970. That's a relatively modest mintage compared to other years, but it's still a high number, which means these coins are not rare in general. However, condition and specific features play a huge role in value. Now let's talk about a 1970 S nickel in bad condition. Maybe one that's been in circulation for decades, with scratches, dings, and fading detail. In most cases, a coin like this won't carry premium collector value. Its value is generally around face value, 5 cents, simply because it's too worn to appeal to collectors seeking high-grade examples. However, it can still be important for beginners building a date and mint mark set of Jefferson nickels, or for educational purposes when learning to identify mint marks, strike quality, and changes over time. But don't count it out just yet. Even a circulated 1970 S nickel can become interesting if it has an error. Look out for doubling, off-center strikes, or die cracks. These types of minting errors can boost the value significantly. Some error. Coins, even in poor condition, have been sold for several dollars or more depending on the severity and rarity of the mistake. There's also the matter of full steps. Although rare, if you happen to find a 1970 S nickel with clear, full steps on Monticello, and somehow it has survived with that detail visible despite circulation, that coin could be worth far more, especially if it's verified and graded. But realistically, a heavily circulated coin is unlikely to have that level of detail. So, to summarize, a 1970 S Jefferson nickel in bad condition usually holds only its face value of 5 cents. It's not a key date, and in worn condition, it's considered common. But that doesn't mean it's worthless. Every coin, even the ones that look rough and dull, connects us to a piece of American history. From the image of Thomas Jefferson to the San Francisco Mint mark and the economic story of the early 1970s, this small coin is still a link to the past. If you're holding on to a 1970 S nickel that's been through decades of pockets and cash registers, don't throw it away. Keep it as part of your journey as a collector. It might not be a jackpot coin, but it still has a story, and that's what coin collecting is all about. Next up, a coin that holds a quiet but important place in U.S. coin history. While it might not be one of the flashiest coins in the series, the 1946 nickel marks a major transition in American coinage, and it remains a fascinating piece for collectors who appreciate history, subtle design changes, and affordable vintage coins. Let's start with the story behind it. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel. It was designed by artist Felix Schlag, and his portrait of President Thomas Jefferson on the front and his Monticello home on the back would remain largely unchanged for decades. But the 1946 nickel represents a turning point, because it was the first year the U.S. Mint returned to the traditional nickel composition after World War II. During the war years from 1942 to 1945, nickels were made using a special wartime alloy of 35% silver, 56% copper, and 9% manganese to save nickel for military use. These wartime nickels are easily identified by the large mint mark above Monticello on the reverse. But in 1946, the mint went back to the original composition, 75% copper and 25% nickel. As a result, 1946 was the first post-war nickel, and collectors often see it as a historical milestone in the Jefferson series. Now let's talk about mint marks. The 1946 Jefferson nickel was produced at 3 different U.S. mint facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia coins have no mint mark, the Denver coins have a small D, and the San Francisco coins have an S, both located to the right of Monticello on the reverse. In terms of mintage, Philadelphia produced the most, over 161 million coins. Denver followed with around 45 million, and San Francisco produced roughly 13.5 million coins, making the 1946 S the lowest mintage of the three. However, even the 1946 S is relatively common in circulated condition, as many of these coins were saved or collected over time. So what about value? In circulated condition, a 1946 Jefferson nickel is generally worth between 5 cents and 25 cents, depending on its wear. These coins are still relatively easy to find in pocket change or coin jars, especially the Philadelphia issues. However, if you find one in uncirculated or mint state condition, that's when the value increases. For example, a 1946 nickel with strong luster and sharp detail can be worth $2 to $5 in lower uncirculated grades and up to $20 or more in higher mint state grades. Collectors especially seek out coins with full steps. This means the steps on Monticello are sharply struck and completely visible. A 1946 nickel with full steps, certified by a grading service like PCGS or NGC, can be worth well over $100, depending on the grade and mint mark. Some high-grade 1946 S full steps nickels have sold for several $100s at auction. It's also worth checking your 1946 nickels for possible errors. Look closely for doubling on the date or letters, die cracks or off-center strikes. These minting mistakes can significantly increase the coin's value, even if it's otherwise circulated. So, whether you're a beginner going through old change or a seasoned collector searching for the perfect full-step specimen, the 1946 Jefferson nickel offers a lot of value, not just in dollars, but in historical importance. It's a symbol of America's return to peacetime production, a reminder of how even small changes in metal composition reflect major shifts in world events, and a staple of any complete Jefferson nickel collection. Next up, today, we're focusing on the 1948 Jefferson nickel, a coin that may not be rare at first glance, but still has a place in U.S. coin history and holds value for collectors, especially in fine condition or better. So whether you're a seasoned numismatist or just getting started, let's take a closer look at what makes the 1948 Jefferson nickel worth your attention. The Jefferson nickel has been a staple of American pocket change since 1938. Designed by Felix Schlag, this coin features a left-facing portrait of President Thomas Jefferson on the front, and the reverse displays his Virginia home, Monticello. This design remained unchanged for many decades, and the 1948 issue is part of that classic early series that many collectors enjoy completing. By 1948, the United States had fully returned to post-war coinage. The wartime silver nickels had ended with the 1945 issue, and beginning in 1946, the mint resumed the original composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. That remained in place through 1948 and beyond. There was no silver in the 1948 nickels, but they were solid, high-quality coins that were made to last. Now let's look at mintage. The 1948 Jefferson nickel was produced at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 89 million coins, the Denver Mint about 45 million, and the San Francisco Mint produced approximately 11.3 million, making the 1948 S the lowest mintage of the 3. All coins feature their mint marks on the reverse, to the right of Monticello, with Philadelphia coins showing no mint mark at all. Now what does it mean if you have a 1948 Jefferson nickel in fine condition? In coin grading, fine refers to a circulated coin that still has most of its major details visible, but shows clear wear, especially on high points like Jefferson's cheek and jawline or the steps of Monticello. It's a middle-of-the-road condition, not a damaged coin, but certainly not mint state. In today's market, a 1948 Jefferson nickel in fine condition is usually worth between 10 and 25 cents. That's not a fortune, but it's still 2 to 5 times face value, and for collectors trying to complete a circulated set by date and mint mark, it's a valuable and affordable coin to add. That said, some 1948 nickels can be worth much more, especially if they're in uncirculated condition with strong details and luster. Coins with full steps, where all the steps on Monticello are clearly visible and unbroken, command significant premiums. A 1948 D or 1948 S nickel with full steps and high mint state grades can sell for $100 to $500, depending on the sharpness and certification. And of course, collectors also keep an eye out for any mint errors. A 1948 nickel with a double die, off-center strike, or die cracks could be worth far more even in circulated grades. So it always pays to examine your coin closely, even if it looks worn. Ultimately, the 1948 Jefferson nickel in fine condition is a great example of how history and value meet in even the simplest of coins. It may not be a rare treasure, but it's part of a series that has been in American hands for generations. Every time you hold one, you're holding a small piece of post-war America, a time of rebuilding, optimism, and steady growth. So next time you're looking through your change or organizing your collection, don't overlook those old nickels. Even the ones with a little wear can still tell a rich story, and just might be worth more than you think. Next up, the 1969 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it might look like any other 5-cent piece you've seen in your pocket change, but this coin actually has a unique place in U.S. coinage history. And even in fine condition, it carries a bit more value than most people expect, especially for collectors who appreciate vintage coins from the late 1960s. The Jefferson nickel has been a staple of American coinage since 1938. Designed by Felix Schlag, it features the familiar left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the front, and on the reverse, we see a classic image of his Virginia estate, Monticello. This design remained unchanged for decades, and the 1969 issue is part of that long-running legacy. By 1969, the United States Mint was producing coins in very high quantities to keep up with economic demands. The coin shortage from earlier in the decade had subsided, but production remained strong. The 1969 Jefferson nickel was struck at 2 different mints, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 146 million nickels that year, and the Denver Mint added another 202 million. Notably, San Francisco did not produce any business strike Jefferson nickels in 1969, only proof coins for collectors. If you're holding a 1969 Jefferson nickel and it doesn't have a mint mark, that means it was struck in Philadelphia. If there's a small D on the reverse, to the right of Monticello, then it came from the Denver Mint. Now let's talk about condition. If your 1969 nickel is in fine condition, that means it has moderate wear from circulation. The major design elements are still visible, Jefferson's facial features, Monticello's columns and dome, but finer details are worn down. It's not a high-grade coin, but it's far from poor. Many collectors build date and mint mark sets using coins in fine or very fine condition, so these are still worth keeping. In terms of value, a 1969 Jefferson nickel in fine condition is usually worth around 5 to 15 cents. While that's not a huge jump from face value, it's still a small premium, and the value can increase depending on demand and market conditions. If you have a full roll of these coins or a collection of nickels from this era, the value begins to add up. Of course, things get more interesting when you consider coins in uncirculated or mint state condition. A 1969 D nickel with strong luster and sharp detail, especially with full steps on Monticello, can sell for $10, $50, or even over $100 depending on its grade. Full steps nickels are those that show all 6 steps on Monticello clearly and without interruption, and they're quite rare for this year due to generally weaker strikes. Also worth checking are error coins. Look closely at your 1969 Jefferson nickel for any signs of doubling off-center strikes, clipped planchets, or die cracks. Even in fine condition, an error coin can be significantly more valuable. There have been a few confirmed double-die obverses and reverse errors from this time period, and collectors are always searching for new discoveries. The 1969 Jefferson. Nickel might not make headlines at major auctions, but it's still a piece of American history. It was minted during a time of cultural change, space exploration, and political tension, and this small coin was in the hands of everyday Americans through it all. Holding a 1969 nickel is like holding a time capsule from a pivotal moment in history. So, whether you found your 1969 nickel in circulation or inherited it from an older collection, it's a coin worth understanding and preserving. It may not be a rare treasure, but it's a part of a series that tells the story of America in metal, year by year, mint by mint. Next up, the 1942 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, it might look like any ordinary 5-cent piece, but the truth is that 1942 was a unique turning point in American coinage history. It marked the transition from peacetime nickels to wartime nickels, and both versions were made that year. If you're lucky enough to have a 1942 nickel, you might be holding a piece of wartime America in your hand. Let's start with the background. The Jefferson nickel series began in 1938. Featuring a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. This design by Felix Schlag remained unchanged for many years. In 1942, the U.S. Mint struck nickels with 2 different metal compositions, and that's where things get interesting. At the beginning of 1942, nickels were still being made with the standard alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel. These were produced early in the year at the Philadelphia and Denver mints. But as the United States became more deeply involved in World War II, nickel, a metal essential for making military equipment, was needed for the war effort. So, later in 1942, the composition of the nickel was changed to a special wartime alloy, 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese. These silver nickels are often called war nickels, and they were struck from late 1942 through 1945. Now here's how you tell the difference. A regular 1942 nickel with no silver will look like any other coin from the series. But the wartime, silver nickels have a large mint mark above the dome of Monticello on the reverse. This was the only time in U.S. coinage history that the mint mark appeared in that location. If your 1942 nickel has a big P, D, or S over Monticello, then it's a wartime silver version. If there's no mint mark or a small mint mark to the right of Monticello, then it's a standard alloy from early 1942. Now, let's talk value. A 1942 nickel made with the original copper-nickel composition in circulated condition is usually worth about 10 to 20 cents. If it's in fine or very fine condition, it might bring a little more. Uncirculated examples, especially those with full steps detail on Monticello, can be worth several dollars depending on their grade and quality. The silver wartime nickels are more valuable. Even in circulated condition, they're typically worth between $1.25 and $3 because of their silver content alone. Uncirculated 1942 silver nickels, particularly those with strong details or full steps, can be worth $10 to $50 or more. The highest grade examples certified by PCGS or NGC can sell for hundreds of dollars at auction, especially if they have rare errors or are part of a high-grade registry set. There are also a few notable errors from 1942 to look out for. Some collectors have found double-die examples, off-center strikes, and clipped planchets. These errors can dramatically increase the value of your coin, even if it's otherwise circulated. The 1942 Jefferson nickel is not just a coin, it's a snapshot of American history. It represents the shift from everyday life to wartime necessity. It's the moment when something as small as a 5-cent coin became part of the national effort to support the troops and win the war. Whether it's the standard alloy version or the silver war nickel, every 1942 nickel has a story to tell. So, if you come across one, take a closer look. Check for that large mint mark above Monticello. Weigh it, examine the surface, and think about what was happening in the world when it was made. A single coin can carry decades of history and This one certainly does.
Next up, we've got a coin that looks way too modern to be worth anything. It's scratched, dingy, the surface is dull and stained. You'd pass it in a heartbeat. But don't blink, because this 2007 P Liberty Jefferson nickel holds a shocking secret. Now, most folks remember Jefferson's traditional side profile that appeared for decades. But starting in 2005, the U.S. Mint launched a bold redesign. And by 2006, Jefferson was facing forward for the first time ever. That full-face portrait became iconic. Then, in 2007, something subtle changed again, something that would become a massive target for serious collectors. The 2007 P nickel, minted in Philadelphia, was part of this postmodern design run. On the front, you see a bold Liberty inscription, written in Jefferson's actual handwriting. It's elegant, it's clean, but on some coins, something went horribly wrong. Our coin here is in awful shape. The Liberty is faded. Jefferson's face looks like it's been chewed up. The rim is damaged. The edge is pitted. Most people wouldn't even pick it up from the ground. But here's the shocker. The 2007 P nickel has a known rare variety with a double-die obverse, where elements of the design, like the Liberty script or Jefferson's eye and nose, show slight but very real doubling under magnification. It's rare, it's subtle, and most people never notice it because, frankly, the coin looks like junk. That's exactly how valuable coins slip through the cracks. In low-grade circulated condition, a regular 2007 P Liberty nickel might go for face value, 5 cents. Maybe 10 cents to a casual collector. But when one of these bad-looking nickels was closely examined and found to contain doubling, a single piece sold for over $4,200. And that was a coin most people would have tossed in a parking lot. Now here's where the excitement spikes. Another 2007 P was found with a missing edge layer error, meaning one of the clad metal layers was never applied correctly. The result? A strange, coppery look bleeding through a coin that's supposed to be uniform. That error, especially from the Philly Mint, is rare. Very rare. A collector paid $7,650 for that coin. And get this, it was circulated. The real monsters? Those ultra-high-grade examples with the FS, full steps designation. That's when every stair on Monticello's steps is visible under magnification. If you find a 2007 P with full steps and it's graded MS 67 or higher, you're looking at $15,000 to $22,000 in auction value. But wait, it gets better. A proof-like strike of the 2007 P, meaning it came off a regular mint press, but with polished dies by mistake, sold for a staggering $137,000 because of its ultra-reflective fields and razor-sharp details. Only a handful are known. Some experts believe it was a test strike that slipped out undetected. And here's the kicker. Bad condition coins aren't always bad news. Some errors only appear on coins that saw circulation. Heat, friction, and time can reveal die flaws, meaning your worst-looking nickel could be your most valuable. So the next time you see a dirty 2007 Liberty nickel with a fading P mint mark, don't look away. Look closer. This could be the 5-cent coin that puts 5 digits in your pocket, and we're just halfway there. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this journey through some of the dirtiest coins hiding the biggest secrets, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss what's coming next, because coin number 3 is where things really start getting crazy. Next up is a 2006 D Liberty Jefferson nickel. And this one? It's in fine condition. Not perfect, but definitely better than the last two. The details are more visible, the rims are still intact, and the wear is minimal. But even so, it's still just a nickel, right? That's where you'd be wrong. At first glance, this coin seems ordinary. It features Jefferson's bold, forward-facing portrait, the script Liberty to the right in his own handwriting, and that small, almost overlooked D mint mark below, signifying it was struck in Denver, a modern coin from a common year. Most people wouldn't give it a second look, but 2006 was a transition year. It marked the final coin in the Westward Journey series before the return to a modified Monticello reverse in 2006. That makes this coin historically important. It represents the moment the mint ended its short-lived tribute to the Lewis and Clark expedition and brought the nickel back to its roots, but with a new twist. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Collectors discovered that some 2006 D nickels had a massive die clash error, meaning the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a coin in between, leaving ghostly imprints of Monticello's columns on Jefferson's face. Sounds like science fiction, but it's real and terrifyingly valuable. One of these coins sold for $8,250 and it wasn't even uncirculated. Another major variety is the detached leg Monticello error, where part of the design on the reverse appears broken or shifted due to a misaligned die. These varieties are extremely scarce, and if you have a clean specimen, even in just fine condition, you're easily looking at $10,000 to $14,000 and rising. Let's talk full steps. On most nickels, especially modern ones, those steps at the base of Monticello are weakly struck. But if you find a 2006 D with full, uninterrupted steps, and it grades above MS 66, the sky's the limit. One MS 67 FS sold for $18,500, and experts believe there are fewer than a dozen graded that high. That's rarer than many silver coins, rarer than some early 1900s issues. And this one? It's hiding in plain sight, in a design barely over a decade old, but it gets even crazier. In 2021, a collector stumbled onto a struck-through error on a 2006 D nickel. A piece of metal shaving had gotten stuck between the die and the planche during minting, creating a deep indentation across Jefferson's forehead. It sold at auction for a mind-blowing $47,300. And the kicker, the coin had visible circulation wear, so don't let fine condition fool you. This isn't about shiny coins. It's about coins with stories, mistakes, and timing. And this one, minted in Denver at the close of a special era in U.S. coin design, it checks every box for collectors. Hold a 2006 D Liberty nickel to the light. And if you spot anything off, doubling, missing details, ghostly shapes, don't hesitate. Get it looked at. You just might be holding a 5-cent piece that could buy you a luxury car. And speaking of surprises, the next coin? It's one that collectors have nightmares about missing. And finally, we come to a coin that's about as average-looking as they come. The 1987 P Jefferson nickel, worn down from decades of circulation. The fields are dull, Jefferson's hair is smoothed out, and the rims have nicks from years of passing hands. It looks like the kind of coin you'd dig out of your car's cup holder and toss into a vending machine without a second thought. But slow down. Because this little coin has a dark horse secret, one that could make it worth well over 6 figures. Let's start with the basics. This 1987 P was minted in Philadelphia, hence the small P mint mark on the obverse. Nothing rare about that. Over 570 million of these nickels were struck that year. It's one of the most common dates in the Jefferson series. And yet that's what makes its secrets even more incredible. Because among those hundreds of millions, a few slipped out of the mint, with errors so dramatic they're still being uncovered and fetching life-changing money. One of the most infamous is the 1987 P no mint mark obverse die cap error. Imagine this. A coin struck so many times by the same die that it creates a ghost-like, bulging image of Jefferson, almost like a melting mask. It's one of the most haunting minting errors ever seen. And yes, it came from a coin just like this one. The last one, found sold for an eye-watering $89,000, despite being in worn, circulated condition. Then there's the off-center strikes. In 1987, the mint faced alignment issues in multiple presses, and some nickels were struck with up to 60% off-center designs. Jefferson's face shifted to the edge, the date half missing. Chaos on a coin. One of these 1987 P off-center errors, just 55% misaligned, sold for $23,750 with visible wear. But the true unicorn? The 1987 P broad-struck partial collar, with double die reverse, a coin that combined multiple major errors into a single strike. The collar failed, the reverse showed heavy doubling, and the result was a coin that looked warped, and doubled in all the wrong places. It was a 1 in a billion mistake. That coin, slabbed and authenticated despite its rough surface, sold for a staggering $145,000. And guess what? It was originally pulled from circulation by someone who thought it just looked weird. That's the magic here. These valuable coins don't always shine. They don't always scream for attention. Sometimes they're hiding in the worst shape imaginable. That's why serious collectors, the ones who've made 5- and 6-figure discoveries, don't ignore ugly coins. They hunt them. Even if your 1987 P nickel is beat up, nicked, bent, or faded, it could still hold one of those legendary errors. Look for off-center strikes. Look for doubling on Monticello's lettering. Look for bizarre edges, sunken details, or signs of a second strike. These are the whispers of a major minting mistake and a monster payday. So as we wrap up this wild ride, remember this: don't judge a coin by its condition. That grungy nickel in your change jar could be one of the few that broke the rules, escaped the mint, and became a collector's legend. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a nickel. It's history, it's mystery. And sometimes, it's a hidden fortune in your very own hands.